Oh, wow. So many folks are joining in. Wonderful.
And this is being recorded now, so we'll send you all the link to the YouTube video of the recording in the coming weeks. And maybe additional resources too.
Great. All right. So let's go ahead and get started. I think we're reaching our a nice steady number here. So again, welcome to this month's Naturehood webinar all about milkweed, monarchs, and you. My name is Jen Aguilar. I'm the education specialist here at the California Native Plant Society, and I'm joined by my colleague Maya. Maya, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is Maya Argamon, and I am on the horticulture team at the California Native Plant Society. So yeah, Jen, take it away. This is going to be fun.
All right, wonderful. So again, we're so excited to have you all here today. As Maya mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. So if you do need to step away for any reason, just know that it will be going up on the CNPS YouTube channel within a few days, or, if you just want to watch it over and over again, please go ahead and do so. So yeah, let's get into it. We have three wonderful presenters for you today that will dive into different topics around milkweed and monarchs. So yeah, without further ado, I'll introduce our first presenter and we'll get into the wonderful content that they all have to share with us today. So first up, we have Emma. So as the Xerces Society Western Monarch Lead, Emma works on the Western population of monarch butterflies, including adaptive management of overwintering habitat in California and breeding habitat throughout the Western United States. Emma completed a master's degree in agroecology and entomology at the University of Wisconsin-Madison, where her research focused on landscape ecology and an invasive fly that affects fruit crops. So previously, Emma worked at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources Endangered Resources Program as a biologist and on an organic vegetable farm in southern Wisconsin. So welcome to Emma, and please take it away.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I am going to share my screen. Bear with me for a moment. All right, here we go. Thanks everyone for being here, and thank you for CNPS for inviting me. I'm really excited to be here and have loved looking at some of your past webinars. So I hope I will be a participant moving forward. Just jumping right in, if you're not familiar with the Xerces Society and you don't know how to spell or say our funky name, we are a conservation NGO, and we focus on pollinator conservation and agricultural biodiversity, pesticide reduction, and endangered species protection. We have about 80 staff spread out throughout the United States. I live and work in Portland, Oregon, but we've got a lot of staff in California and throughout the states and Canada. So if it's been a while since you've taken kind of a basic biology class, which many folks did maybe back in elementary school, and you learned about the butterfly life cycle, or you're familiar with the very hungry caterpillar, a quick refresher: a butterfly begins its life as a small egg, and that egg hatches and becomes a caterpillar. And that caterpillar goes through multiple instars, which is kind of a fancy word for the different stages of it being a caterpillar. And with each change of stage, it sheds its skin and becomes a larger caterpillar. During this stage for monarchs, they're eating their host plant milkweed in the genus Asclepias, as well as a few related genera. And then finally, when that caterpillar is large enough, it's going to form a chrysalis and undergo that incredible transformation to become a butterfly and emerge. So for monarchs, and when we think about migratory monarchs in North America, we primarily talk about Eastern monarchs and Western monarchs. So this is there's a lot going on in the schematic, but the takeaway I want you to have here is that what we're representing in the lower 48 states, there's less known in Northern Mexico, but we do know there's some limited breeding happening in Northern Mexico and even into Southern Canada, where milkweed can grow. So we have in the spring and summer, we have milkweed, and thus we can have the potential to have monarchs kind of anywhere in this area. And we know that in the east, which is any monarch born east of the Rocky Mountains, we consider an Eastern monarch, but there tends to be a pulse of a generation right now in the spring in the southern states, and then in the summer, more typically in the northern states, and sometimes another generation in the fall in the south before they migrate down to central Mexico and spend the winter there. In the West, any monarchs born west of the Rocky Mountains, we really see a different story. So we have kind of continuous breeding happening spring, summer, and even into early fall throughout most of California. And if you're near the coast, sometimes we even have kind of just year-round breeding occurring, especially if there's non-native milkweeds. More interior parts of the West, like Idaho, we're typically only seeing monarchs in peak summer months. So depending on where you are in the West, we could have just up to 4 generations, or parts of California, we suspect up to 6 generations of monarchs that are occurring each year. And those summer adults only live a couple of weeks, but that migratory, or that super generation that completes the migration to the overwintering sites, we believe lives at least 6 months, if not more. And why do monarchs migrate is a fascinating question in and of itself that we won't go into, but like many animals that migrate, we think it's driven by for insects intolerant to prolonged freezing temperatures, as well as they're trying to find that milkweed food source and kind of go anywhere it's available, as well as do things like escape disease and predators that can build up if you stay in the same place for a long time. So Eastern and Western monarchs migrate to different areas. There's also a really cool evidence that's been discovered by community scientists in recent years, showing that some portion of Western monarchs, specifically in the Southwest, also can go to central Mexico and mix with Eastern monarchs. So there's definitely flow. This is not a closed system, and we're still learning a lot more about how these two populations interact. But in general, in the West, monarchs overwinter on coastal overwintering sites that are spread along the coast of California and even into northern Baja Mexico. So on the left, you see these lavender dots all represent individual places that we know monarchs overwinter. So it's not just Pacific Grove or Pismo or Lighthouse Field or Natural Bridges, or maybe some of the sites you might be most familiar with because they draw a large number of visitors. There are actually many, many sites that monarchs use. And I'll talk a little bit more about why I think getting that message across to people is really important, because we need more eyes paying attention to the areas that they overwinter in. These tend to be areas really close to the ocean. They're more diffuse, and in many orders of magnitude fewer butterflies that migrate to coastal California compared to central Mexico, where the landscape is completely different. We're talking like high volcanic mountain range. We are talking really high elevation. We're away from the coast, and they're much more concentrated in fewer sites. So from here on out, I'm mostly talking about the Western population and specifically California, given you all as the audience. So for the West, how we track the population size is primarily when they're conveniently clustered for us to count in those overwintering sites in the coast. And so they arrive in October and November. We have one primary count around Thanksgiving, and this is thanks to over 25 years of community science. So there are over 250 volunteers, we estimate, on an annual basis in recent years that go out with primarily volunteer coordinators who are associated with natural history museums or on their own, or with a state or federal agency, to kind of help those volunteers get oriented, get trained, and go out and count butterflies in a standardized way. And all of that great work gets kind of distilled down to this one graph. So it's kind of a dry product for what is actually a really cool, vibrant, and ongoing community science program that can involve a lot of different folks. If you want to learn more, westernmonarchcount.org is our program website. We've got a lot of great resources and an interactive map of overwintering sites. But the main takeaway I want you to see here, that blue line are the number of sites that our volunteers are visiting, and that number is going up, up, and up. Meanwhile, that green bar represents the number of butterflies we estimate. And that number has stayed relatively stable. And actually, when we do the fancy statistics on this, we're showing a really significant decline in the number of butterflies that we're seeing over time. And even before this project was started in the late 90s, there were estimates back in the 80s. So kind of based on those 80s estimates and other corroborating information, we have really good evidence that we've seen about a 95% decline in the population in recent years. And just a few years ago, we saw such a crash that we really were concerned that we had seen a collapse of the migration. So in terms of its conservation status, a few status that you might want to know about are the IUCN's Red List, which has no legal legal teeth, but essentially is kind of our, cross political boundary way of understanding the conservation status of animals. They recently decided that migratory monarchs qualify as endangered. Federally, under the Endangered Species Act, monarchs are in this kind of limbo of being candidate species, which means that they qualified based on their population status and threats, but there were higher priorities within the agency, so it's not listed yet. So we expect a listing from the Fish and Wildlife Service in the next year. And then at a state level, the monarch is a special status invertebrate. So how did we get here? Why have we seen this massive decline? Like so many wildlife species issues, there's not just one smoking gun, but we've seen really a loss of degradation and that overwintering habitat at the coast, a loss of the milkweed and the nectar plants they rely on across the West and across California, widespread pesticide contamination, including herbicides, which target plants, and insecticides, which target insects, climate change, which we think is making everything a little bit harder. And then there could be other factors that we don't understand as well, like disease or non-native predators. And it's not just monarchs, there's kind of widespread evidence now that there are definitely an insect apocalypse, there's a biodiversity crisis, and monarchs are just part of that. They just happen to be very charismatic, very easy to count, and we have good information on them. So I like bringing that up, that I hope that a lot of our work to raise awareness around monarchs is really about raising awareness for all these other animals. And the good news is that a lot of the steps we take to help monarchs can also help other butterflies and animals. So with that, I'm kind of just going to jump in to how we can all be part of the solution, because I guess it just gave you a lot of bummer news. And I think there are a few takeaways you get from this, that there's a lot we can do. What's so cool about working on monarchs is they are found in such a wide range of habitats, urban areas, natural lands, working lands. So there are so many different types of people and land uses that can get involved in the solution, and we need everybody on board. So protecting and restoring breeding habitat, protecting and restoring that overwintering habitat, reducing risks from pesticides, participating in community science, advocating, and if it's affordable and accessible to you, trying to support farmers and use your dollars to buy food that uses fewer pesticides, that's organic or no spray or Be Better certified or incorporates more wildlife friendly practices. So what do monarchs need? At a basic level, they need milkweed. This is the only plant that their caterpillars can survive on. Ideally, it's native milkweed for reasons we'll touch on briefly later. The adults, though, are generalists and can use a wide range of plants to get nectar, including from milkweeds, but they can also use other plants. And then again, trying to think about making that habitat as safe as possible in terms of protection from pesticides. And there are kind of ongoing research projects to look at how other features might impact monarch breeding success. Some of those, especially in our more inland areas, the Central Valley, we've got some emerging evidence that, having shade can be really important. So when we get those extreme warm summer days, that they have greater success for those caterpillars if they're in milkweed, in the shade or near shade. And so again, what's so great about this plant is you can grow many species of milkweed in a pot. You can grow it in bioswales, you can grow it in yards. So there are a lot of public places and a lot of really small spaces that we can fit this plant into. It also can really fit into working lands. This is an example of like a pollinator hedgerow that some of our staff helped incorporate on a farm in California. And we've got some great guidance for folks if they want to learn. One of our best go-to guides is about creating habitat in the Central Valley. It's really pretty much a great primer for anywhere though. So it's kind of my go-to one-stop shop if people want just like a short guide on kind of how to get going with creating habitat. And what species and where you should plant them, I think will be covered really well by our next speakers. But I think the two big ones to walk away with are narrowleaf milkweed, Asclepias fascicularis, and showy, Asclepias speciosa. They're both also the most widely available commercially. So if you can use the CalScape tool, which is fantastic, I love directing people to that to figure out like what's native to their area. But if that's a little bit intimidating, I think these are great like takeaways of just native, and they're broadly native milkweeds. There's some less available but really interesting species as well that we think could be extra important because they sometimes emerge earlier than showy and narrowleaf. Listed there, woolly pod, Californica, cordifolia. In general, we don't recommend planting milkweed right at overwintering sites because it typically doesn't overlap with the species native range. And we think it can cause problems because monarchs are focused on overwintering, not breeding during those winter months. As much as possible, incorporating more than one milkweed species is great because they can emerge at different times, which can offer different kind of windows of opportunity for those caterpillars. And in general, trying to avoid planting more non-native tropical milkweed, Asclepias curassavica, which goes by many names and is widely sold in big box stores in particular. This is widely planted. There's still like a lot we need to learn about it, and it can become somewhat controversial. There have been some county level bans, but in general, what we say is if you have it, it's a great opportunity to start replacing it with natives, or at a minimum, try to cut it back in the fall to break some of the disease cycles that we see associated with this plant. And we're continuing to learn more about how it might be affecting this butterfly. But native milkweeds availability is limited, especially outside of kind of those big species that I listed, speciosa and fascicularis. So a lot of groups are working on this, including people who will be speaking next. But just wanted to let you know of a few other efforts, that there are a lot of establishment trials going on with rhizomes, especially when we have limited irrigation. And the U.S. Forest Service Pollinator Center recently launched kind of a large effort with multiple groups getting funded to increase availability and do research on these early emerging milkweed species. And if you just want to know where to go buy milkweed plants or seeds, you can use Xerces Milkweed Finder tool. And this is a snapshot of a map of nurseries that sell native milkweed. I'm sure there are many more. These are just ones that are part of our tool, but it's a good place to send people who might just want an answer of which nursery they should go to. And it's not just about milkweed. Monarchs need nectar. They don't just use native plants. In this case, they are generalists. But focusing on plants that bloom in the spring and the fall, we think might be the most important, because that's when they need the most energy to complete that long distance migration. And we've got some plant lists, and I believe, there are other ways, like you can look on Calscape and see which ones are kind of butterfly friendly. So you can get a wide range of plants that support other pollinators and maybe even larval hosts for other butterflies. And then those are always the feel-good things. Let's go plant plants. I think this is the topic that tends to not get as much attention, but I think is worth bringing up more and more, which is there's really good evidence that there is widespread contamination from pesticides in milkweeds. And there have been 2 strong studies, widespread sampling of native milkweeds and non-native milkweeds in nurseries and natural areas, in gardens and working landscapes. And widespread contamination has been found of these plants. And now there's efforts to kind of expand some of that sampling beyond milkweeds, but very much indicative of kind of how widespread and pervasive pesticide contamination can be, including at ways that we think harm pollinators like monarchs. And it's not just about spraying overhead. There's a lot of movement of pesticides in our soil and in our water, and they can act systemically in plants, which again can be kind of a hard thing to take in and say, well, how can I make this better as an individual? So I think one way that you can do this is trying to seek out and purchase plants that have less contamination. So finding plants that are organic, or again, no spray, growing things from seed, growing things yourself, or doing exchange with family and friends or in your neighborhood is a great way to get lower contamination. If you aren't going to get something that is organic, asking questions and at least getting something that doesn't contain neonicotinoids or other similar systemic insecticides. And it's also an opportunity to talk to your nursery, get to know your nursery. And I think as we get more people asking these questions, hopefully there's more kind of incentive for nurseries to change practices to be more pollinator friendly. And to that end, there's some great resources, again, to kind of start that conversation or share, or if you yourself grow plants, steps you can take to kind of think about reducing reliance on some of those chemicals. And then a quick plug, our application period just ended, so I'm sorry to say that, but we have a habitat kit program where we provide native milkweeds and other plants at no cost to projects that qualify on working lands or on public lands. We've got a lot on school properties as well. And this project has been growing in popularity, so we will continue to do it next year if you want to apply. Here's just one of those fun photos of people picking up their plants that they get to go home and plant. And then just briefly, I know we're focused on milkweed and monarchs today, but my personal passion are these unsung overwintering sites, which again, I'll just point out, there are a ton of them, and they are not just the ones that might come to mind. And this is where some of the restoration challenges are really kind of interesting, because they often use a non-native tree. They often use non-native eucalyptus, which is not a popular tree for lots of good reasons, But one reason I like to point out that we should think about this tree, and at least for the small areas where we know they're using it, we need to protect it and manage it well. So monarchs use a range of native trees, but they also have really adapted to use this widespread, widely planted non-native tree, eucalyptus. And so we really need more focus on restoring and managing those habitats. Here's folks at state parks and the U.S. Forest Service doing restoration at Pismo Beach and at Los Padres National Forest. And so as an individual, unless you're a manager of those lands, it's kind of hard to tap in, but I think there are ways that people can just be the eyes and ears on the ground. We actually have had like some really great success stories of averting disasters where trees were going to get cut down or there was going to be a development, and someone contacted us or someone else and said, hey, I see that this is happening. Here's a photo of a site getting cut down that was hosting thousands of monarchs in Ventura. And usually it's just a lack of understanding that monarchs are using it and that this is a special, habitat area. So speaking up and becoming familiar with the sites in your area, again, using that interactive map tool where we've mapped them. They're also mapped in CNDDB. If you use that fun tool that the state provides about where like species occurrences are. And there can be policy changes we can make to protect these sites at the local level. And if all of that feels a little bit too abstract, just planting things if you live near the coast that provide nectar. Monarchs will actually travel miles from overwintering sites into neighborhoods to find nectar. So anything that kind of blooms in the winter and can provide nectar or that you see bees on, it can be a really great source for monarchs. And then my last plug is just community science. Again, something everyone can participate in. The Western Monarch Milkweed Mapper is just one example. Monarch Joint Venture has another great program called the Integrated Monarch Monitoring Protocol if you want to go that hardcore route and do a protocol-based survey. Ours is a little bit lower barrier here because all you need to do is take a photo. So if you have a smartphone, you can take a photo, you can upload your photo of a monarch or a milkweed anywhere in the Western US, any time of year. And if you have the iNaturalist app, you can tag our project and then it populates on this great living map. And you can also use this to explore where recent records have occurred in your area of where there's monarchs or where there's milkweeds. And then one final slide that I'm kind of slipping in here, not related to monarchs or milkweeds, but I thought this audience might like it, which is the California Bumblebee Atlas is entering its second year. If you're not familiar with it, it's a really cool coalition of groups trying to get people out and learning bumblebee identification, and experts help you. And that's really helping do like a statewide survey of bumblebees. So just a little plug for the really cool California Bumblebee Atlas. And with that, I'll just say thank you. And we have a QR code if you're really interested in more community science opportunities related to insects. And finally, just thank you to our supporters. We are a donor-based organization. And if you care to donate, we would appreciate it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Emma. That was a wonderful presentation full of a lot of content. It definitely got our viewers participating and asking questions. So we'll get to those in just a second, but please keep the questions coming in. All right, so we'll go into our next presentation. So I'd like to introduce Antonio Sanchez. So Antonio Sanchez is the nursery manager and restoration volunteer outreach coordinator for SAMO Fund in the Santa Monica Mountains National Recreation Area. The nursery grows over 80,000 native plants a year for restoration purposes and supplies over 30,000 a year to the public free of charge for urban restoration. Over the next 2 years, the nursery will grow 100,000 narrowleaf milkweed plants to give away to local residents and to help restore areas in the Santa Monica Mountains. Antonio has over 15 years of experience with California native plants, having run the nurseries at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, working as a landscaper at that garden, and working as a nursery technician at the Theodore Payne Foundation for Native Plants. Antonio co-founded and ran Nopalito Native Plant Nursery in Ventura, California, with a good friend and cousin for nearly 4 years. He was lead organizer for the first Ventura County Native Plant Symposium, the California Native Sage Festival, the California Native Food Symposium, and the Southern California Monarch and Milkweed Conference. He is also the co-founder of a native plant band called Sage Against the Machine. You are doing a lot, Antonio. So welcome, please take it away.
Ben, I sent that bio to you as a joke. I wanted to see how many lines you would read, and you read them all, Jen.
I will read them
You
all.
would go, you took up my 15 minutes. I'll take questions. Thank you. We'll see you. Good night. Thanks, Jen. Emma, Tora, Maya, I'm very happy and honored to be alongside you all today, giving this talk for all of California and hopefully parts of the rest of the world too. So thank you so much, Jen and CNPS, for hosting myself. I get to work right now for the Santa Monica Mountains Fund. We call it SAMO Fund here in Southern California, which is basically parts of traditional Chumash, Tataviam, Tongva, and Kich traditional lands, and it still continues to be to this day. So we get to work in LA and Ventura counties doing amazing work in the Santa Monica Mountains with native plants. And I love our work, and hopefully it'll come through with the stuff that we could do with Monarchs. I see in the chat that someone had a question about people that were giving out milkweed. Whoever that was, check us out, por favor, because we are giving out 25,000 milkweed plants this year, narrow-leaf milkweed. These are some of the plants, or these are some of the dates that we have. I'll get back to this in a second. Jen, is it true that I have, was it 45 minutes, 2 hours? How long is it?
You now have 1 minute, so
I love
please
it.
wrap it up.
Okay, all right. It's I love Jen. So there's my email. I'll show it to you guys again. And here's some of the specific spots that we're gonna have. Being from Oxnard personally, it's very important that we go back to Oxnard and give out plants. We're going to downtown LA, Camarillo, San Fernando Valley, Simi Valley, and a bunch. And I want to make this plea to you all. This is a serious plea. If you guys can help us give out some of this plant to somebody in your neighborhood, we would love to connect with you. We recently connected with Mudtown Farms in Watts, and we're going to be giving out plants not just to their community, but to some of their farmers on their farms. So I hope you guys take me seriously when I say that we have thousands of narrow-leaf milkweed to give out, and we would love to collaborate with you. So what do we do in the park and in Southern California and Santa Monica Mountains? I get to run the Native Plant Nursery, who have a beautiful conservation seed collection program where we collect about 50 to 60 species a year of conservation quality seed collections. And we grow about 120,000 plants a year at this time. And most of them are for restoration. So we do about 70,000 plants for restoration. But as you guys will see, what I like to come with plants, with native plants at, is from a different angle, maybe than some people. And this is just where I come from. I don't think of native plants as just beautiful plants that are in 1 gallons that are overpriced at a Home Depot or at a Lowe's. Like you could find Penstemon Margarita Bob, you could find Cenotes Yankee Point, all those great native plants there. But I think our plants have so much more to offer, and they have offered so much more. So when we look at plants and getting milkweed out to the public, is not talking about a native plant. We're basically trying to get people into plants through other areas. And so I helped do this when I used to work at Rancho Santa Ana Botanic Garden, which is now known as California Botanic Garden, with a good friend of mine, Naomi Fraga. We helped start the California Native Sage Festival, which was just basically a copy of a lavender festival that someone had gone to in the Inland Empire. They came back, one of our volunteers said, hey, I got drunk on lavender beer, and they took us tours on the farm, and we're like, no, we could do a California Native Sage Festival here. And it became the biggest day that Rancho Santa Ana had ever had. Over 1,000 people came. We grew a bunch of sage. We did talks on sage. We invited a lot of local native folks to help us out, to collaborate with us. And it was an amazing day. And Rancho to this day still continues to do stuff associated with native plants and food, or now they're doing beer festivals. And the same thing we did with the California Native Food Symposium. We organized a bunch of folks, native and non-native, to help us give talks on how to eat and how to basically consume California, not in a disrespectful way, but basically, when you take a plant and you become that plant for better or worse. And so we had these talks about, kind of modern uses and traditional uses, and it was amazing when we saw, we had over 300 people at the Native Food Symposium. And so how do we get people into native plants apart from just saying they're landscaping plants that will get 3 feet tall, they're drought tolerant, right? And so at the park, we have these volunteer days, and most of our work is done by volunteers and low paid interns. I'm sorry to say they're very low paid. We've quadrupled the amount that we offer our interns since I started. We get to offer them $80 a day now, but I still think it's underpaid, but we're getting there. And so most Fridays and Saturdays in Newbury Park, we offer people free plants to help us out. If you come for 2 hours and help us divide Stipropulchra, or you help us seed, Sisyrinchian bell and blue-eyed grass, or you help us transplant penstemons, we'll give you 3 plants to take home. And one of our good, not good because all of our volunteers are good, one of our just intense, and she's always there, volunteers, Michelle, started talking to us about milkweed, and she's like, hey, we should grow some milkweed, and this is why. And I knew what a monarch butterfly was before, and I had grown milkweed before, but I realized that, man, a lot of people want milkweed and a lot of people care about monarchs, and they're not necessarily people who are into native plants. And so we started writing grants, and we started hiring folks and started growing milkweed with a purpose, right? To get it out there to the public. And so we were able to work with some amazing interns, a few of them who became co-workers of ours. And one of them was Ashley Borrego, who I believe has given a talk here for CNPS before. And she did this work while she was an intern of ours, checking an older barium sample of narrowleaf milkweed on the PCH, which is the one freeway that goes kind of between Santa Barbara and all the way down to Malibu, basically where Brad Pitt and all the famous people are at. And she's seen this old herbarium sample from the 90s, and it was an narrowleaf milkweed, and it said that this area was slated for development. And Ashley went out there and she checked it out, and sure enough, right now that place has been developed and the narrowleaf milkweed is gone. And we have different feelings about development, depends on who you are, but I think most of us could agree, if you're going to develop something and you're going to put landscape plants in your development, like you're going to have a Walmart or you're going to have a housing development, we should probably put back some of the plants that are important that you just took out. And so it was kind of, it kind of made our hearts drop a little bit that there was a chance to put back narrowleaf milkweed on this site, and people just refused to. And so we just hit the gas and we're like, let's start applying for grants. Let's just start doing this. And I don't mean this lightly, but some of these grants are very easy to get for us because people know what it is what a monarch is, right? So we're not talking about some hard to describe insect or animal. And we're talking about a to grow plant, so we can actually grow this plant very easy, this narrowleaf milkweed. And we throw another thing in there, which is we try to hire folks, mostly youth. So the park classifies youth as folks 35 years or younger, mostly local youth from communities like Oxnard and other communities, not all of Oxnard, but much of Oxnard, people that would never go to the park, that had no idea that the park is there, right? And so this is just an example of one of the grants that we've gotten and one of the jobs that we're doing, hiring people, right? And then so we started having these milkweed conferences. We've had 2 so far, and the first one, which is in 2021, was amazing. And part of why it was so amazing, unfortunately, was COVID, because most people weren't doing stuff. They weren't able to go out. We weren't able to gather like a lot of us will do now. But we had over 1,300 people registered. And I think more importantly, we had over 500 people stay and listen to us for 5.5 hours. Jen, I don't know how you feel, but I don't even want to listen to my partner talk for 5.5 hours. Jen, I'm sure you don't want to listen to Felipe talk for 5.5 hours. These people were tuned in for 5.5 hours to listen. And so people want this, and it's not necessarily a native plant, right? And so we get one of the big questions we get, and how I like to come at it is people are like, well, I have tropical milkweed, and my monarchs, the caterpillars will eat the hell out of tropical milkweed. And I go, hey, I got kids at home, and in my freezer at this moment, I have ice cream. And in my fridge at this moment, I have cactus or nopales. If I put both of them out in front of my kids, which one are they going to go for? It doesn't, just because my kids go for ice cream doesn't mean that's the correct choice. And I'm not saying that nature is stupid, and hopefully I'm not saying that my kids are stupid. Hopefully that's not the message I'm getting across. But just because we see something happen in our gardens doesn't mean that that's correct, right? A lot of times we have manipulated things. And so we try to explain things to folks in a way that hopefully they can digest easily, right? And so what we tell people as we give out narrowleaf milkweed to the public is that it's easy to grow. You can grow it in clay soil, sand, heat, fog. We have a lot of foggy areas, a lot of sunny areas that get over 105 degrees. We try to give them out from March to August. And we tell them just to treat them like an annual plant, basically. They're not annuals, obviously. Hopefully you guys know they're not annuals. They don't die after 1 year, right? They go dormant and they'll come back the next year. So we'll water them 2 to 3 times a week. And this is kind of against what a lot of people talk about with native plants, is to plant November, December, January, and to try to get them established and don't water during the summer, right? And so we're telling them something a little bit different, but let's remember, we're not really dealing with the native plant crowd when we're giving out 25,000 plants. And so we like to make things fun. I was reading something, I'm not a bug person. I didn't graduate college. I just was reading something one day that said Monarchs suck. And I'm all, yeah, they do. And it turns out that they suck. And so we try to make catchy things so we can grab people's attention, right? And now we've written all these other grants, and we're lucky enough to hire high school youth to help us do some of this work. This is a high school program through the Oxnard High School School District, where we are able to hire a small amount, 11 youth for $15 an hour to help us do some of this work here in Ventura County and LA County. And we're lucky enough in Ventura County to be the first county, and I love this, the first county in California whose ag commissioner said, hey, nurseries, whether it's Lowe's or a wholesale nursery, you cannot grow tropical milkweed anymore. And so the ag commissioner actually had to go out and throw out plants that were being grown. And we found this huge gap of people who wanted plants in Ventura County. And so we were able to give out over 6,000 narrow leaf milkweed last summer, just because the ag commissioner in our county had made this choice. And so some of the things that we've learned over the last 2 or 3 years is to keep it fun and light. I think I tell people, hey, you're going to plant narrow leaf milkweed, treat it like a sun gold tomato or like an early girl tomato, water it 2 or 3 times a week. Then the next year we'll treat it drought tolerant. We always make sure we give a minimum of 5 plants. And some people are like, oh, 5 plants, that's a lot of plants. And I tell people, hey, look, if you plant 1 milkweed, you're going to attract a monarch, a mom. She's probably going to lay her eggs, and some of those eggs are going to hatch. And what happens is the caterpillars will probably eat themselves to death. And so hopefully we don't tell them that darkly. We say, hey, if you're going to have a kid's birthday party at the park, and you invite, your kid, and he invites 20 kids of his friends, and you only bring 1 Little Caesars pizza. By the way, Jen, I'm not being sponsored by Little Caesars, but if you only buy 1 Little Caesars pizza for 20 kids, they're going to be pissed off. So as you invite monarchs to your garden, provide enough food for the caterpillars. They're going to eat. They're going to eat like hungry 5-year-olds at a kid's birthday party. So we give away a minimum of 5 plants. We've learned not to give seed away anymore, because what people do with seed is they usually just put it in a drawer, or they forget to plant it, or they plant it at the wrong time. And so all we're doing is live plants right now. And we know that a lot of our people live close to the coast. And so we always want to offer them pollinator-friendly plants in case they live too close to the coast to where a lot of us recommend you don't plant, or you don't have enough space for 5 plants, right? And so there's some things that we need to get better at, which is working more with local tribal members. I admit that we've done, I think, a horrible job at that, but I think we're doing better every year. Something we've learned through some of our research is how to germinate and how to grow Ariocarpa and Asclepias californica. And I think we've gotten really, really good at it, which are some of the early flowering and early kind of breaking dormancy milkweeds. And so again, here's our list of some of our stuff. We're going to do a bunch in June and July. And there's some of the specific spots. I would love to hear from some of you to see if we can collaborate here in Southern California. Those of you who are in Central and Northern California, I'm so sorry. I just send out love, but I hope you guys have groups like ours that can do hopefully what we're doing. And this work would not be possible without interns, without volunteers, without coworkers, without partners like the National Park, without funders, and of course, without the milkweed plants and the monarchs who are actually doing the heavy lifting. There's my email. We'd love to collaborate with you all. So I just wanted to make it quick, Jen. So I think that's all I have prepared, but I'm going to pass it on, I think.
Sounds good. Thank you so much, Antonio. That was a whirlwind of information, very, very good information that I think got a lot of folks very excited, and they want you to, give away milkweed plants all across the state. There's some demand for you, Antonio.
If you guys find me, I'm in Colonia and Oxnard. I'm behind the 7-Eleven. You'll find me in the gray Ford F-150. You can find me there, giving out Radio Láser stickers until 9 p.m.
Great, good to know. So for those of you in the area, please Please go find him. All right, let's get into our next presentation. So next up, we have Tora Rocha. Tora is an expert in landscape design and gardening for pollinators with over 40 years of experience. Passionate about pollinator conservation, Tora co-founded the Pollinator Posse in Oakland, California, to create pollinator habitat throughout the urban jungle. Through her work with the Pollinator Posse, Tora creates pollinator-friendly landscaping and fosters appreciation of local ecosystems through outreach and education in the urban and highly diverse communities in Oakland, California. Pollinator Posse envisions a day when life-enhancing, thought-inspiring green spaces will grace every corner of Northern California and the world. Tora was recently awarded a Jefferson Award for Public Service in the Bay Area. So welcome, Tora, and please take it away.
Hello, everyone. Antonio, wow. And Emma, that was amazing. I am proud to be in the same space as you. And thank you so much, CNPS, for inviting me back again for Naturehood. We are not able to share my screen like everyone else, so bear with me on this. You're going to see my taskbar the whole time, but anyway, I started the Pollinator Posse about 13 years ago. I was a park supervisor for the city of Oakland when I had an epiphany about the fact that as landscapers, we are all destroying our habitats. And the way we are looking at landscapes, we're all looking at landscapes through aesthetically pleasing to humans instead of to the ecosystem. So my main goal is to get all of you, I assume on this talk, if you're on this talk that you're a gardener, that you never call yourself just a gardener again. You're not just a landscaper, a gardener, a hobbyist, whatever. If you put your hands in the dirt, everything you do affects your local ecosystem. Every single thing, whether you water, whether you don't water, whether you plant natives, whether you don't plant natives, whether you mow, whether you don't mow, you prune, rake your leaves, every little thing affects the local ecosystem. So you are a steward of the ecosystem if you put your hand in the dirt. And I want everyone to remember that when you're out there gardening, and learn more about how you're affecting the ecosystem. And that's the goal of the posse. Is to get everyone to remember that they are a steward of the ecosystem. It came to me when I was a park supervisor, I would get people emailing me saying, why haven't you weeded that side of Lake Merritt? You know, I was downtown in Lake Merritt mostly, and I had the botanical gardens at Lake Merritt, and I also had the rose garden up the street. So I also had specialty gardens on top of 100 park and public sites that I had to maintain with my staff. So I'd run out there and I would see that the weeds were like plantain, which is a host plant for buckeye butterflies, and thistle, which is a fabulous pollinator plant. And the 50 people would email me, and I started putting these signs out saying, pardon our weeds, it's pollinator habitat. The same 50 people emailed me, said, thank you for what you're doing. So as a landscaper and a gardener, we have the power to change the perception of what we're planting and how we're affecting the ecosystem. So when you're out there planting, learn as much as you can from these organizations that we just heard from, and also the Pollinator Posse. We have some pretty cool resources on our website. Anyway, we just need to get out there and educate the public even more about what is a weed and what's not a weed. For years, I would talk to garden clubs and they all banned milkweed because it was a weed and it was invasive. And now we're finding out how important milkweed is. And thank you, Antonio, for getting out thousands of free milkweeds. And also, since everyone before me talked about milkweeds, I want to talk about how important nectar plants for monarchs are, especially if you're in the temperate climate of California, where you might have overwintering sites. Nectar plants that are blooming from fall through early spring are super important. Super, 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 super important, especially for overwintering monarchs, since they have to try to stay alive for almost 6 months before they can start migrating and leaving the next generation. So having long blooming nectar plants are super important. This one in the middle is Verbena delamina, which is like one of those powerhouse plants that we need to plant closer to the overwintering sites or near them so they can do that. It's a native to California. The fascicularis, the milkweed on your left, is also a great nectar plant in the fall. When the Californian and when the monarchs are coming back to California, they can find the narrow leaf and nectar on it and then maybe lay eggs or maybe not. Ceanothus is another one of our powerhouse plants. There's a whole list of plants. Xerxes has a fabulous monarch nectaring list that you should go to. We won't have time to go through all of them today, but you can contact us and I will help you find some nectaring plants for your area. Also Cowscape, just like Emma said, one of my favorite tools. Thank you, CNPS. This is like the most amazing tool. If all you have to do is put your zip code into this website and it'll list all the plants in your area. And if you look at each plant on the left-hand side of it is a number that tells you how many Lepidoptera use that plant. So basically, if you have a small yard, you want to get the most bang for your buck. And so look for a plant that has that number on the left-hand side, a larger number, like at the bottom, it says red willow. It uses 20 different Lepidoptera use that plant. What above scrub oak uses 15. So use one that gets your most bang for your buck. That's what I tell everyone. On our website, it's a little blurry. This is a list of plants that I put together that are from a lot of like California Bees and Blooms, and it's from Xerxes Society plants, but they're all listed in the months that they bloom, in the color that they bloom. So this is really designer friendly. And you can pull it up, it's free. It's under resources at pollinatorposse.org. And I wanted to do that for designers. It's really easy to get 365 days of color, especially if you're, near the coast, because that's what you want. But you can look in the January, February, March, and then October, November, December columns and find nectar for the monarchs. It's pretty easy to go use that tool. Also, the thing everyone talks about planting habitat for monarchs and for other pollinators, but maintaining your garden with monarchs in mind is really important. We can plant milkweed all we want, but if we're over pruning and over maintaining our gardens, they're not going to survive. Monarchs go to chrysalis. They don't go to chrysalis on their milkweed necessarily. They're going to find a place or a plant or something that's really sturdy and strong. And these are pictures I've showed, like on the bottom, on the underside of a fence post. You can see these chrysalis. And I wanted you to see what a chrysalis looks like. They look very different at the beginning than they do at the end. And those are going to be in your garden. If you're blowing heavily or weed eating like crazy on the edges of your garden and you're over pruning, like I said, you're probably wiping out chrysalis. Other Lepidoptera use dry leaves. So if you're raking your leaves, you're wiping out generations of Lepidoptera or beetles. So it's maintaining your yard a lot gentler and sweeter. And just observe what you're bringing, what is coming. Once you plant the native plants, if you want local, regional, specific pollinators, you need local, regional plants. At least 75% of the plants in your garden should be local, should be native to your region to bring your local pollinators. But monarchs are not as picky, like Emma talked about. They're generalists when it comes to nectar, but it does come down to maintaining your garden once they come in. I have trained my staff in the garden when we had milkweed. They wanted to prune the salvia because it was getting to be winter, which we'd get a lot of breeding monarchs in September. And we had a lot of salvias near our milkweed in this one garden. And they wanted to prune it back because it was getting to be winter. And I said, you better look at that plant before you prune it back to make sure they didn't have any chrysalis. And sure enough, we found 20 chrysalis on that one pineapple sage. So it tells you, we have to learn to be more observant and to pay attention and maintain not just plant habitat, but maintain your garden with pollinators in mind. Emerging milkweed is another one. This one on your right is speciosa, newly emerged. The one on your left is cordifolia. I'm up here in Northern California, up in the Sierra foothills, and cordifolia is our early blooming one. Heartleaf milkweed. It's just a little more difficult to grow than narrowleaf. Narrowleaf is also native up here. Narrowleaf is much easier to grow from seed, but we're working with master gardeners up here to try to propagate milkweed as much as we can. Cordifolia is one that we really want to get out because it, like I said, it's an earlier bloomer. But I believe it likes to grow on its side. So if you have rocky, gravelly soil, I would try cordifolia. It's all up here in the Sierras, a lot near Folsom Lake. If you go hiking in Folsom Lake, you'll see it a lot, especially right now. This picture was taken 2 weeks ago. So that shows you how large the cordifolia already is in the season. But on the right-hand side, the speciosa, a lot of times what happens is people are weeding their yard and look at how small those rhizome those leaves are, and they get buried by the local grasses or whatever, and people just weed it right out. So make sure you give a little space for your milkweed and pay attention. Also, when you're growing new milkweed, I'm sure Antonio gets this question all the time, that people will plant the new milkweed and it takes a couple years really to get going. Anything that's rhizomatous, plants in general that are rhizomatous, they spend the first year sending out their rhizomes instead of a lot of leaves. So people get frustrated and they think that they're not doing it right. And it's not true. It's just that it's sending all its energy to create a stronger root system. And the rhizomes are a lot more fibrous than in other like perennial plants that are woody. So give it a little time, be patient. Please be patient with your milkweed. Don't give up, and don't overwater them. Don't water them every single day. That a lot of times when I go to see people's milkweed and I look at it, it's usually overwatered. That's a big problem, especially in Northern California. Water them a couple times a week, but when they first get them, but don't water them every single day. That's probably the most common. And I saw someone talk about aphids in the chat. We came up with we call it an ecosystem in a box that we have, that we're selling as a pollinator posse fundraiser. But that was our biggest complaint on our Facebook. Our Facebook page was, what do we do about the aphids? Well, there's proven facts now that aphids actually do help the monarch larva when it's growing on the milkweed, because then the predators come and can eat the aphids instead of the caterpillars and the eggs. So they're actually better for the monarchs if there are aphids on there. But also, if you plant plants that attract hover and syrphid flies, then the hover and syrphid flies, their larvae eat 500 aphids a piece. So what I've done in that ecosystem in a box is planted is a collection of 12 seeds. They're all native except for Tithonia. There's 2 milkweed species, which is showy milkweed and fascicularis. And the rest are plants that attract hover and syrphid flies like Achillea and Facilias. Facilias are always a great plant for attracting beneficials. And then they'll take care of the aphids in a more timely manner. And then you don't have to worry about it. Don't spray the aphids off because you're probably knocking eggs off or little tiny caterpillars. So that's, I wanted to address that question that I saw. Right now, it's so important to do community science. The Pollinator Posse is partnering with Monarch Joint Venture now, and we are training people to be monarch larval monitors throughout the state. And if you're interested, go to pollinatorposse.org and email us, and you can get trained. We train people throughout the state on how to monitor their milkweed for their larvae, and it goes into a national database for science researchers to understand more about where the monarchs are going, where our critical habitat, what milkweed they're on. It's also really important, even if you don't have data, like if you have milkweed and you don't see larvae, even that is so important. Don't worry that if you haven't seen a monarch in a couple of years, it's still important to monitor the milkweeds. So if you're interested in that, it's really actually a fun program, and we've trained hundreds of people now so far. Monarch joint venture is putting a lot of effort into this. This is sort of like one of the sample pictures. They train you on what to look for on your milkweed, like what the difference between a latex drop is versus a monarch egg. Then there's an egg close-up. This is just a sample of what's in your kit that they give you when you sign up for this. There's so many great organizations to get involved in. Get your community involved. Antonio's doing a great job. Emma Xerxes is a great organization. You know, they have B-City USA, Monarch joint venture. You can get a Monarch way station. National Wildlife has the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. If you can get your whole community involved, you can make a huge difference for monarchs. The Pollinator Posse, you can join us. We're always trying to get local government agencies to get involved. Because I work for the city of Oakland for 37 years, I know it's really popular, and I know that it's actually can make a big difference when we trained our staff to pay attention to milkweed and not weed eat it down. Also, we stopped spraying pesticides for 25 years in Oakland, and it's making a huge difference in our pollinator populations. So if we can do it, you can do it. And I pressured the mayor, and she took the mayor's Monarch Pledge. And then in May of 22nd of 2021, she announced that it was Pollinator Posse Day in the city of Oakland. And people came out, and we gave away free milkweed seed. We don't have plants to give away, but we can give free fascicularis seed away. If anyone's interested, you can email us at pollinatorposse.org. But get your community involved, because pollinators are part of our community. So let's get some of these mayors to take a Monarch Pledge so that they can make a difference, so that the maintenance workers in these cities are also being educated and trained on what milkweed looks like and how to create habitat and nectar for these fabulous pollinators. That's it. I have a 3-year-old that taught me why monarchs are special. He's like, Tora, why do you know why monarchs are special? I'm like, no, tell me. And he said, they're the fairies of our earth. They fly just like Tinkerbell. Thank you. I'm gonna stop sharing.
Great. Thank you so much, Tora. That was a wonderful presentation and a great way to end that and just bring it all back. We are kind of close to our time, but we do have another minute or two to take a couple of your questions that have come through. There are so many questions. So I'd like to kind of pose this to all of our wonderful speakers today, but there are some questions around any tips or resources that y'all have for determining if there are any insects that are beneficial versus insects that are maybe need to be removed for the protection of the milkweed plant. So if there's anything y'all can weigh in with there, that'd be helpful.
Jen, what I found is for the eggs and the caterpillars, anything that's gonna treat, you know, any insects that we're trying to get rid of will probably hurt the eggs and the caterpillars. The eggs are hard to see too, and sometimes the caterpillars too. So we don't treat. We've never had a problem with the aphids. We have had a problem with the beetles that puncture the seed pods, and they'll abort this. It'll kind of suck the juice out of the seed as it's maturing. So those we do, believe it or not, we knock them into, we found this on the internet, we'll knock them into soapy water and they'll kind of drown. And then we'll make little taquitos out of them every Friday. We'll just have like a carne asada. Yeah, I'm gonna see how many times I can get Jen to laugh. Anyways, that has worked, especially because we're going for seed production, because we don't want to keep pulling seed from nature, like natural habitats. But we haven't seen that they're a problem. you know, the aphids and all those things. They look bad, and if you're a tomato grower, you're probably freaking out. But you know, we just don't do nothing about them.
Okay, thanks, Antonio. Any other things to add, Emma or Tora?
I was just going to pop in the chat. Xerxes does have like a quick guide for IPM. So if you are growing milkweed for seed, you got a like different tolerance for some of that stuff. But in general, you know, for on our end too, I think we get so many public questions, and I saw some in the chat for people being like, what about this? What about this? And I think this is where, like, at least my own personal view, it's like, I hope this work is helping lots of pollinators, and like those milkweed seed bugs are native. Those aphids, maybe not all of them, the oleander ones, but you know, like I think it's one of those like getting people to just be excited about it. There's other cool insects, and you are going to lose some, and there are non-native insects that are going to eat some of your monarchs. That's a bummer. And if you want to go hardcore and like put, you know, mesh caging and things like that, you know, there are things people do if they really want to focus on that monarch production. But I think if you can zoom out as much as possible, especially with like resource limitation too, where we see people like that kind of egg dumping, or there's too many caterpillars and people start to go to like elaborate lengths. I feel like personally, I don't have time to do much of that. Just let nature take its course. If you do, great. But I think it's more reason to like keep investing in like more native plants, more diversity, and that helps like balance things out. So you don't have this like, there's just one patch of milkweed, and then you're trying to kind of keep it to be this like isolated zone where nothing else can thrive. That's not personally like my philosophy, but I do think I see people like get really upset when their caterpillars die, and I understand that.
Yeah, I have to remind people too that, you know, the caterpillars are not just an important part for just becoming butterflies, but they're the really critical part of the food chain. 75% of all songbirds feed their fledglings caterpillars. So it's like a really important part. So they're just a huge part of the food chain. And that's also the aphids are a huge part of the food chain too. So we don't want you to use any kind of pesticides for any of it. It's all part of that chain. And like I said, and the syrphid and hoverflies get a bad rap, but they're actually the second best pollinators next to bees. And their larvae eat aphids. So you want to attract syrphid flies, and the plants that attract syrphid flies are mostly the same that attract other pollinators. You can find out in our ecosystem in a box, like I said, the list of plants. Even if you don't get our seed kit, it shows you a great combination of plants that attract the right beneficials to the around a milkweed. And like Emma said, it's like if you see egg dumping, that means you don't have enough milkweed. Usually a monarch will not dump that many eggs on one milkweed plant unless they can't find another plant in the area. So if you're finding that your plant is covered with eggs, please plant more milkweed. You just don't have enough. And then probably your neighborhood doesn't have enough. And that's usually an indicator. We've had that happen in Oakland, and we realized that we had a few milkweed plants. Once we started planting a lot more, we didn't have that problem.
Great. Thank you so much for all of that insight around this question. I think it answered a lot of other questions that came up in the chat as well. I know we're over time, so please, if any of our attendees have to go, please do so. But I wanted to follow up with just one last question, and we can call it there. There were quite a few folks that were looking for any tips or recommendations in terms of growing milkweed in pots in the ground. What sort of advice can you offer for folks that may not have the space and they still want to grow milkweed, or maybe do have the space but like it in pots? You know, what can you share with us about that?
I found that the fascicularis grows better in pots than the speciosa. It likes it a lot better. If you have a small garden, stick to the narrow leaf. The speciosa it's just such a deep rooted rhizome that you got to have quite a big pot. And also, you know, they love the warmth. So if you have a southwest facing wall, that's the best place to put your pots of milkweed. If you're in the central valley where it's super hot, then I would give it morning sun and not the west facing hot sun like you would on the coast. But I've never had a problem with narrow leaf growing in pots the way I have with the other ones. Cordifolia actually likes a deep rooted pot too. So it depends on where you are in California.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you all so much for your time, for your expertise, for your energy. I think everyone here is so excited about this, and there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of wonderful monarchs and plants to see. So again, thank you all so much for joining us here today. And I'd like to thank all of our attendees for coming and joining us today in your evening. We do have another Naturehood webinar coming up next month, June 1st, same time, 5:30 to 6:30. And the next one will be focused on garden pests and how to kind of get rid of them the natural way. So please join us again on June 1st for another Naturehood webinar. So thank you all so much, and I hope you all have a great night. We'll be following up with an email with resources and the recording of this webinar. So thank you all.
Thank you so much. See you all next month.
Yeah.
Thanks to all the speakers. Thank you.